How old are you, both of you?
Both 13.
First thing for me is I can't please all my girls.
I was done with you.
Yeah.
Marriages have that, though. Marriages have that.
Yeah, we broke up.
And then what did you do, Jada?
Well, I think from there, as time went on, I got into a different kind of entanglement.
That was our homies right there. You know what I'm saying? We kicked it with them all the motherfucking time. Wow. That was the first dude I seen. You think Jada Pinkett was entangling? She was entangling with Chris Kelly from motherfucking Kross, because Kross was in the room and he was like, Jada Pinkett is at the door, but don't.
Welcome back to Juicy Pulse, your daily dose of scandal and glamour. Let's spill the tea on today's biggest celebrity stories. What if the real story behind Chris Kelly's heartbreaking death was nothing like we've been told? Chris Smith, the other half of the legendary Kross, is finally breaking his silence. And the truth he's spilling is straight up wild. He's not holding back, pointing fingers directly at Jada Pinkett Smith and Jermaine Dupri, accusing them of playing shady roles in Chris's downfall. Now there's buzz about secret affairs and even a possible cover-up. Yeah, it's getting real messy, real fast. Chris Smith claims Jada had Chris caught up in some toxic drama that pushed him towards illegal substances. And get this, he says Jermaine knew the whole time but stayed silent. Seriously? Could Jada really have influenced a teenage star like that? And why would Jermaine just stand by and let it all happen? Smith's words are sparking a storm, and fans are stunned. It's a whole new layer to a tragedy that already shook the music world. Let's rewind to 1992. Two kids from Atlanta blew up the scene after Jermaine Dupri spotted them at a local mall. Kross became an overnight sensation. But behind the fame, it seems there was way more going on than anyone imagined. That random mall run-in, it changed everything. That's how Kross was born. A duo that didn't just drop hits, but completely flipped the script with their wild fashion move, rocking their clothes backwards. They weren't just a gimmick, they were trendsetters, and the world couldn't get enough. But here's the jaw-dropper. Chris Kelly was just 13, and Chris Smith only 12. Yet somehow they had Jermaine Dupri hooked from the jump. In a 2018 interview with Grammy.com, Jermaine spilled, "You gotta understand, people out there, Kross weren't rappers. They weren't kids walking around with demos. They weren't trying to be rappers. They weren't trying to be singers. When I met them, I said, what do y'all do? He said, we just cool. I was like, damn, get these guys a record fast. And he wasn't wrong. Giving them a shot turned into gold. Their debut single Jump took off like a rocket, snatching the #1 spot and refusing to let go for 8 straight weeks. It became the heart of their smash hit multi-platinum album Totally Crossed Out, with Jermaine Dupri behind the lyrics. Even at that young age, the duo delivered with surprising swagger. Their style was tight, their sound was fresh, and they moved 4 million copies like it was nothing. From Mac Daddy to Daddy Mac, these kids were on top of the world. That track Jump wasn't just a hit, it was a full-blown cultural explosion. Overnight, Kross went from 2 cool kids to full-on superstars, running shoulder to shoulder with the heavy hitters. They were suddenly opening for Michael Jackson on tour. Yep, the king of pop himself. Then came TV cameos, magazine covers, and even their own video game. Insane, right? These weren't just teenagers. They were living a dream most grown artists never touch. From Make My Video to hip-hop nicknames like the Top of Hip-Hop and the Pac-Man who ain't no waxman, they had their own flavor and the crowd was hooked. But fame's a tricky thing. Lightning like Jump doesn't always strike twice. While they never landed another monster hit like that, they still kept it moving with tracks like Warm It Up and Tonight's the Night, keeping their fan base alive and vibing. They dropped 2 more albums in the 90s before drifting apart, each heading in their own direction. But not everything was smooth behind the scenes. As they grew up in the spotlight, concerns started creeping in. People began to wonder, was all this too much for kids that young? By 2009, fans were seriously worried when photos of Chris Kelly surfaced, showing bald spots. Rumors flew. Was he sick? Was something going on? Some even feared it was cancer. But Kelly shut it down in a brave interview, revealing he had alopecia, a condition that causes hair loss. No shame, no secrets, just raw honesty. My health is good. I just got alopecia. I don't have cancer or any other disease. That's what Chris Kelly said when people started speculating, shutting down rumors with honesty. But nobody was ready for the devastating news that hit just a few years later. On May 1st, 2013, everything changed. Chris Kelly was found unresponsive at his Atlanta home. He was rushed to a nearby hospital, but it was too late. The world lost a hip-hop icon that day, and fans were heartbroken. His mother later told Atlanta authorities that the night before his death, Kris had taken illegal substances and became violently ill. She also revealed that her son had struggled with substance use issues for some time. It was a gut punch, not just to the industry, but to everyone who grew up on Kris Kross. Kris Smith, his lifelong friend and the other half of the duo, was shattered. In a heartfelt statement, he said, "Kris Kelly was my best friend. He was like a brother. I love him and will miss him dearly. Our friendship began as little boys in first grade. We grew up together. It was a blessing to achieve success, travel the world, and entertain Kris Kross fans around the world with my best friend." He added, "It's what we wanted to do, and it brought us joy." And the love between them was real, and fans could feel it. Jermaine Dupri also spoke out, and his words were heavy. "To the world, Kris was McDaddy. But to me, he was the son I never had. When I think about it, I spent more time with Kris and Kris than damn near anybody in my whole life, so you can imagine how bad this hurt." The pain was deep. This wasn't just a loss to music, it was personal. "I'll always love you, Kris, and I'll never let the world forget you. May God bless your soul." Kris Smith's tribute hit hard, raw grief from someone who truly lived every moment with him. So Def, the label that helped shape Kris Kross, also spoke out. Their statement read, "To millions, he was the backwards clothes-wearing star who lit up stages and changed the game. But to us, he was just Kris, kind, generous, always the life of the party." They added that while his time on Earth was short, the moments they shared with him were unforgettable. And his legacy, it's forever stitched into the culture. But even with heartfelt messages pouring in, fans were still asking, how did it come to this? How could someone with so much life be gone at just 34? Then things took a turn. In 2022, Daz Dillinger dropped a serious bombshell, and it left jaws on the floor. He claimed Jada Pinkett Smith had some kind of entanglement with Kris Kelly back in 1993. At that time, Jada was 22, and Kris, just 15. That's a major age gap, and it didn't stop there. Daz alleged that Jada not only got close with the teenage star, but also introduced him to illegal substances. Serious claims that threw a whole new shadow over the story. Now people are starting to question just how deep this really goes, and who was really there for Kris when he needed help the most. Some folks figured Daz was just name-dropping Jada to stir up drama and grab a little shine. But nah, it doesn't look like that at all. Because Jada's past, it ain't squeaky clean like people love to believe. Behind the red carpets and polished interviews, she's been open about having a dark side, and it started way back. Believe it or not, when Jada was a teen, she was actually out on the street selling illegal substances. Yup. She said it herself in an interview with People. She came up in a rough home and said she had to hustle just to survive. Her words were straight up shocking. "I knew that anything I needed was something I needed to provide for," she admitted. "I decided to sell drugs." She went on to explain that growing up, the people who had money, status, and respect in her neighborhood were the drug dealers. Not doctors, not lawyers. That was the reality she saw. Jada revealed her mom was struggling too, a high-functioning heroin addict, as she described it. Their home was falling apart, and they didn't have much. So in her eyes, hustling seemed like the only way out. And here's the kicker. Jada kept living that street life until she met Tupac. Wild, right? One moment she's in the game, next thing you know, she's running in circles with a rap legend. It's no wonder people are now digging deeper into her past, especially with Kris Kelly's name tied into the story. Ada meeting Tupac might have changed her path, but it didn't wipe away the past, and now people are connecting the dots in ways that don't look good for her. With Kris Kelly's name being dragged into the mix, fans are wondering if she really had that kind of influence back in the day, what else happened behind the scenes? And let's not forget Jermaine Dupri. While he's mostly remembered as the mastermind who discovered Kris Kross, some are now calling him out too. Why? Because if Kris was struggling for years, how did Jermaine, someone who spent so much time with him, not step in? Or worse, did he look the other way? Some insiders say Jermaine was focused on keeping the brand alive, not the boys. There are whispers that Kris's issues were visible for a while. Changes in his appearance, canceled gigs, the works, and yet not much was done. Fans are asking, was the machine more important than the man? Now that Daz's claims are out in the open, people are putting both Jada and Jermaine under the microscope. Could Jada's alleged connection with Kris have fueled his downfall? And did Jermaine ignore the signs? There's no solid proof yet, just a storm of suspicions and unanswered questions, but one thing's for sure. The story behind Kris Kross isn't as clean-cut as it once looked, and people aren't done digging. Not even close. As the spotlight keeps heating up, more people are stepping forward, and it's only making things messier. Behind the fame, money, and chart-topping hits, the truth about Kris Kross's inner circle is starting to crack wide open. Some fans are now looking sideways at the entire industry that surrounded these boys. Imagine being just 12 or 13, thrown into the fast life, surrounded by adults, fame, and pressure. That kind of chaos can twist anyone's world, especially a kid's. And now folks are asking who is really protecting Kris Kelly. There's talk that Kris didn't just fall into substance use randomly, that he might have been exposed to it way too early by the very people who should have been guiding him. And while Jada and Jermaine are catching the most heat, fans are saying there were way more people involved in Kris's world. So why is no one else being held accountable? Even in old interviews, Kris gave off the vibe that he was carrying more weight than he let on, smiling on camera, but something behind his eyes looked tired, like he'd seen too much too soon. Now, with new theories, resurfaced clips, and a growing pile of whispers, the legacy of Kross is under serious scrutiny. Was their success built on sacrifice? Was the price of fame too high? One thing's clear. This story isn't just about music anymore. It's about what happens when the industry takes in kids and spits them out broken. As more layers peel back, fans can't help but feel like Kris Kelly was failed. Not just by individuals, but by an entire system. A young star with the world at his feet, but behind the scenes, it was a different story. The glitz was real, but so was the pain. And now, people are starting to say it out loud. For years, it seemed like no one wanted to talk about what really happened. Kris's name was kept alive through nostalgic hits and throwback tributes, but the deeper struggles swept under the rug. Until now, the silence is finally being broken, and the more people talk, the uglier it gets. There are fans who say Jada's alleged involvement should have been called out way earlier. And Jermaine? Some say he protected the brand but didn't protect the boys. Others are questioning how so many red flags got ignored, and if those in power just chose not to see them. Even worse, there's talk that Kris might have tried to reach out for help, but no one listened. If that's true, the pain runs deeper than anyone expected. This isn't just a story of fame and loss. It's a story about how fast the industry moves on, even when someone's crying out for help. And now that the truth is starting to shake loose, fans want justice. They want real accountability, because Kris Kelly deserved better, and people are done staying quiet about it. Now that the truth is crawling out from the shadows, fans aren't just angry, they're furious. For years, Kris Kelly was celebrated for his music, but barely anyone talked about the battles he faced behind the fame. And now that the spotlight's finally on the truth, it's lighting up a whole lot of people who were once hiding in the background. Whispers about Jada's past with Kris, the shady silence from Jermaine, and the industry's cold shoulder. It's all out there now. And what's wild is how long it took for this to come to the surface. People are asking, why did it take Daz Dillinger in 2022 to bring this up? Why didn't anyone with power speak up back then? Some fans think it's because protecting reputations was more important than protecting Kris. Others say the industry never had space for vulnerable young artists, especially ones dealing with trauma. And now people are looking at the entire 90s scene through a whole new lens. This ain't just about Kross anymore. It's about the cost of fame and how many young stars have been left behind once the cameras stopped rolling. Kris's death wasn't just tragic, it feels like it was avoidable. And that's what's making this hit even harder. Now fans are demanding answers, justice, and truth, because sweeping it under the rug, that's over. The world is finally ready to talk, and Kris Kelly's story deserves to be heard loud and clear. With the pressure building, people aren't just talking, they're digging. Old interviews, backstage clips, fan encounters. Everything's being rewatched, reanalyzed, and questioned. Suddenly, things that once felt innocent now seem like red flags that were ignored or brushed off. Fans have started piecing together a timeline, and it's not pretty. The changes in Kris's appearance, the noticeable weight shifts, the distant eyes during performances, all signs that he was going through something major. And the worst part? It feels like nobody stepped in when it really mattered. And as for Jada, the internet's been on fire ever since Daz dropped that bomb. People are demanding answers, wondering why no legal action was ever taken, or why the situation was never addressed publicly before. If what Daz said is true, it paints a deeply disturbing picture of influence, manipulation, and a failure to protect someone so young. Jermaine Dupri hasn't responded to the new wave of backlash, but fans are calling him out left and right. The silence, it's only adding more fuel. People feel like he was in the perfect position to help, but maybe chose the success of the brand over the well-being of the person. Now every move is being watched, the pressure's real, the questions aren't going away, and Kris Kelly's story is no longer just a memory, it's a wake-up call, one the world refuses to ignore any longer. As more people wake up to the truth, Kris Kelly's story is starting to look like one of the biggest cover-ups in hip-hop history. What was once a nostalgic tale of two kids who rocked their clothes backwards has turned into a gut-wrenching saga of silence, pressure, and betrayal. And now it's not just fans digging, it's creators, podcasters, even independent journalists shining a light on what really happened. They're calling out the double standards, the way people in power dodged responsibility, and how Kris's pain got pushed to the background in favor of the brand. The vibe has shifted. No one's buying the "it was just the times" excuse anymore. Because the deeper folks go, the more it feels like Kris was let down by everyone who should have had his back. From the people who managed his career to the ones who claimed to care for him personally. Jada Pinkett Smith and Jermaine Dupri might be the ones catching the heat now, but fans are saying it's bigger than them. It's about the whole system that let a teenager spiral while everyone smiled for the cameras. People aren't letting this go. They want justice, they want accountability, and most of all, they want Chris Kelly's name to mean more than just a throwback hit. Because now, his story is a symbol, a warning of what happens when fame is treated like a shield and the pain behind it gets ignored. The conversation around Chris Kelly isn't slowing down. It's getting louder by the day. People are starting to realize this wasn't just a sad ending to a young artist's story. It was a setup that was broken from the start. Fans are calling it what it is: neglect. Chris wasn't just another artist caught in the fame machine. He was a kid, thrown into the deep end with no real protection. Surrounded by adults, exposed to temptations, pushed by the industry, and expected to just keep performing like everything was fine. And now that Daz Dillinger's claims are out in the open, people are demanding more than just statements. They want accountability from everyone involved. Not just Jada, not just Jermaine, but anyone who stood by and watched things fall apart. Some are even calling for a full investigation. Not just into what may have happened between Chris and Jada, but into how the industry failed to safeguard a child star who clearly needed help. There are calls for documentaries, exposés, anything that will put the truth front and center. Because what happened to Chris Kelly isn't just history, it's a reflection of what's still happening today. Young talent, big money, and no one watching their back. The world's watching now, and this time it won't be brushed off. Chris's story deserves the spotlight, not just for the music he made, but for the truth he never got to tell. The pressure's on. And now it's not just about justice for Chris Kelly, it's about exposing a culture that's been brushing this kind of pain under the rug for decades. This story lit a fire, and it's not going out anytime soon. Industry insiders are finally being forced to answer the hard questions. How many other young artists were silenced? How many were battling demons behind the scenes while everyone smiled for photo ops and counted their money? People are done ignoring it. They want names, dates, and real answers. Some fans are now pointing fingers at label execs, PR teams, and even family members who may have known something was wrong, but stayed quiet. It's a web of silence that's only just starting to unravel. And the more people dig, the more they're finding. Unearthed interviews, old footage, cryptic lyrics, it's all being picked apart piece by piece. This isn't just gossip anymore. It's turned into a mission to honor Chris Kelly by making sure his truth isn't forgotten and that nobody like him gets left behind again. People are rallying online, pushing for transparency and protection for the next generation of artists. Chris's voice may be gone, but now the world's shouting on his behalf. What started with Backwards Jeans and a #1 hit is now a call to action. And this time, they're not letting it fade away. Now the story of Chris Kelly is bigger than just a throwback headline. It's a symbol of everything that's wrong with how the industry treats its young stars. The truth? Chris didn't just slip through the cracks, he was pushed. And now, the people who once stood in the spotlight beside him are facing the heat they dodged for way too long. Fans aren't letting this slide. There's real anger, real hurt, and a demand for accountability that's getting louder every single day. Social media is flooded with clips, theories, and breakdowns. People are calling for those in power to step forward and speak the truth. Jada Pinkett Smith's silence, it's deafening. Jermaine Dupri's lack of response, that's not sitting right with anybody. And the industry as a whole, getting called out for years of ignoring warning signs until it's too late. But here's the shift. This time the public isn't just mourning, they're mobilizing. People want safeguards, transparency, and real support systems for young talent. They want to make sure that what happened to Chris Kelly never happens again. He was more than Mac Daddy. He was more than a hit song. He was a kid with dreams, trapped in a machine that didn't care if he made it out. Now the world is finally listening, and they're not letting go until the truth gets dragged into the light. For Chris, for every young artist who never got a chance to speak, Chris Kelly's legacy will never be the same. Not just because of the music, but because of the truth that's finally being exposed. What started as a feel-good story about two kids making it big has now peeled back into something darker and way more real. For years, people danced to Jump, rocked Backwards Jeans, and laughed at throwback clips. But behind the scenes, Chris was drowning, and nobody threw him a lifeline. Now, that silence is haunting. It's loud, and it's unforgivable. The sad truth is, if more people had spoken up, if just one person had stepped in, Chris Kelly might still be here today. But instead, the world is left piecing together his pain long after he's gone. This isn't just a warning, it's a demand. For change, for accountability, and for justice. For Chris, for every child star caught up in fame they weren't ready for and abandoned when the spotlight dimmed. And as the noise grows, the message gets clearer. The industry can't keep hiding behind image and success. Real lives are on the line. Chris Kelly's story shook the world once, but now it's shaking the system. People won't forget. They won't move on quietly because this time they're not just fans, as they're his voice, his fight, his unfinished truth, and they're making sure the world hears it, loud and clear. For context, Jada and Tupac met way back in 1986 when they were both sophomores at the Baltimore School for the Arts. Around that time, Jada was just starting to clean up her act, trying to leave the street life behind. But here's where it gets messy. She crossed paths with Chris Kelly in 1993, and for a lot of folks, that timeline just doesn't sit right. Think about it. Could she really have kicked all her old habits that fast, especially after living deep in the hustle? That's why, after Daz's claims and the resurfacing of Jada's past, a lot of fans believe she may have played a role in steering Kris in the wrong direction. And if that sounds like a reach, hold on, because Kris's own mother didn't hold back. She openly blamed the music industry for her son's downfall, saying it chewed him up and spit him out. According to her, Kris had been battling the pressures of the industry for years. He tried to stay afloat, but the only way he knew how was by using illegal substances. And during the final months of his life, he hit a dangerous new low. The stuff he turned to wasn't just risky, it was deadly. And what pushed him there? His mom had no doubts. She believed there was a breaking point, and someone or something pushed him right over the edge. Kris's mother believed the real tragedy started when her son was pushed into an adult world way too soon. Being so young in such a ruthless industry left him wide open, exposed to pressures, temptations, and people with questionable intentions. She didn't drop any names, but let's be real, fans felt like her message was loud and clear. All signs pointed to two key figures, Jermaine Dupri and Jada Pinkett Smith. Jermaine was supposed to be the one guiding Kross of their mentor, the adult in the room, but instead of protecting them, many feel like he dropped the ball. The pressure, the fame, the lack of real support, fans believe Jermaine let it all spiral. And then there's Jada. While she's been accused of pulling Kris into shady situations, it's her past that's raising even more eyebrows now. From her alleged influence during Kris's darkest times to her well-known entanglement with August Alsina, a much younger man, people are starting to see a pattern. Back in 2020, during an episode of Red Table Talk, Jada openly admitted to the entanglement with August. And when Vulture interviewed August, he confirmed everything. I don't know why that word is such an issue. If you look up the definition, it is a complex and difficult relationship. It was exactly that. The language might sound polished, but the facts, they've got people seriously questioning her role in Kris's life and whether her past behavior shows a pattern that's been overlooked for way too long. It was definitely a complicated situation, no denying that. The wild part, Jada and August Alsina got involved when he was just 23, and she was 44. That was back in 2015. Now sure, it wasn't illegal, but it definitely raised eyebrows. And for a lot of fans, it brought back old suspicions about her past, especially when it came to her connection with Kris Kelly. That age gap with August had folks looking at Jada sideways and wondering if she was cool with dating someone young enough to be her son, then what really went down between her and Kris back in the day? Kris Kelly's death left a hole in the hearts of fans, family, and friends. But even years later, the pain hasn't faded because the questions never stopped. People still want to know who failed him, who turned a blind eye, and who should be held accountable. With so many of the industry's darkest secrets coming to light lately, fans are now calling for something bigger, a real investigation, not just into Kris's tragic passing, but into the roles Jada and Jermaine may have played in it all. So now we ask you, what's your take? Did Jada cross a line? And did Jermaine help bury the truth? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share to stay in the loop with all the latest tea. Hit that notification bell so you never miss an update, and I'll catch you in the next video.